Imagine waking up to a gray world tainted by the presence of a newborn wall slicing through the heart of your city. There has always been intangible divisions and unavoidable tensions, and you could feel it deep inside you, but your fears and discomforts never solidified until one fateful night. The night of November 9th, 1989 was a time for jubilance, for the impossible had just been achieved. The Berlin Wall, a hindrance to personal economy and a distressing barrier between families, had fallen. This wall started from the conflict that was brewing in the repelling ideas of two different types of governments, communism and capitalism. In an attempt to mend the conflict between the communist East and the capitalist West, many compromises were established, including countless rare negotiations used to ease the tensions between the two sides and the treaties utilized to reunite the rejoiced Germany. Although it has been 28 years since the fall of the wall, it will forever stand as an emblem of repression, division, and the overcoming of segregation, a history that should never be repeated. The Berlin Wall was erected on the evening of August 13, 1961, but the conflict that built this wall dates further back into history. It began at the conclusion of World War II in September 1945, when the four allies, France, Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union, divided both Germany and its capital, Berlin, into four factions. Less than a year later, on March 5, 1946, the Iron Curtain was established as a political, military, and ideological barrier that bifurcated Europe into a communist east side and a capitalist west side. Germany and Berlin were both split into two segments due to the same ideological conflicts because the Soviet Union, who settled in the east, promoted communism while the other countries in the west emphasized capitalism. Since communist sides had less freedom and worse living conditions compared to the west, many turned to the possibility of escape. Escapes into the two halves of Germany were not permitted, but there was an open border in Berlin allowing easy travel. Because of this, more than 3 million people escaped to West Germany via West Berlin, weakening East Germany's economy due to the diminished workforce. That's when the East German government made a decision that would change the history of communism and capitalism forever, building an 155-kilometer wall encompassing West Berlin and isolating it for over 2 decades. The Berlin Wall in 1961 was just mesh fencing and barbed wire, but it soon evolved into concrete walls housing hundreds of watchtowers, spike strips, automatic guns, guard dogs, and more. All guards, no matter how conflicted, were ordered to kill any East German escaper on sight. It was true that the creation of the wall stabilized the East German government, for it even expressed that communism would be successful. However, the East German government's brutal ways tarnished its reputation, turning it into a global symbol of communist oppression. This displays the dangers of the future if atrocities like this continue and how terrible it is for people if history's conflicts repeated themselves. Although the East German government was ultimately stabilized by this wall, it still harmed its people. The most important yet most disregarded aspect of the Berlin Wall was the feeling the Germans had to endure. Escaping was almost out of question due to the safety of themselves and their families.
Defectors' families, could definitely be jailed. They could lose privileged position. They could lose their party membership. They could lose jobs. They could lose privileged positions. They could lose nice houses they had and these sorts of things.
The East Germans were trapped, for they were stripped of their liberties, jobs, and families. This conflict resulted in the Four Power Agreement, which was instigated on September 3, 1971, and the Transit Agreement, which were compromises that secured traveling rights. These compromises allowed West Berliners to visit their families in the East, but this type of travel was discouraged due to the extensive and exorbitant visa application processes. Plus, tedious checks on vehicles are required for travelers. However, it was beneficial for Germany as a whole because it released the tensions that was brewing between the East and the West. These compromises, along with the Basic Treaty of 1972, largely impacted Germany because it improved relations between the two contradicting sides. Fear overrides everything. Those confined feared for their freedoms and conflicts that remained. Those free worried for the well-being of their families and friends. Those who were willing to accept the dangers and cross the wall were concerned for their family and their own lives if they ever got uncovered. Then comes jubilation. It was the evening of November 9, 1989, when East German Politburo member Gunter Schabowski at a press conference announced that traveling visas were lifted and the Berlin Walls to be opened. When asked when, he said, "Immediately without delay." In truth, it was supposed to be put into session the following day and a lengthy visa application was still required, but Schabowski's confusing words and the media's erroneous and conflicting reports caused huge crowds of people to flood the wall to see if the statement was true. A border guard, overwhelmed by the overjoyed crowd, didn't receive any specific orders from his superiors, so he didn't know what course of action to take. Later, he decided to order all the guards to open the gates. The battle that led to his decision was internal, for he knew that at the cost of the people's freedom may come his own punishments, but he completed the task regardless, for even he himself was moved by the indescribable delight on the people's faces. Quote, once I was able to come to terms with what had happened, I was happy for all the East German citizens too, because they got what they wanted, end quote, Harold Jagger. These emotions of division and the overcoming of separation, no matter positive, negative, or even conflicting, will forever live in the skeleton and memory of the Berlin Wall, as this barrier will stand as a representation of the extreme emotions and heartbreaking segregation that people experienced during this time. This pain and happiness will never be relinquished, and it will never be forgotten.
It was their own desire to be free and their willingness to confront their regimes. That night on November 9th, when the wall came down, 1989, the East German regime was faced with either the choice of shooting its own people in huge numbers or opening the wall. They chose, fortunately, the latter. It was part of this human drive for freedom that took place throughout East Europe. The wall was the most visible symbol of that, and its collapse is remembered and should be remembered by everybody as to what the human spirit can do.
Germany began negotiating reunification on October 3, 1990, and on August 31st, the Unification Treaty was born and Germany was officially reunited. Later, on September 12, 1990, the four occupying powers negotiated the compromise known as the 2+4 Treaty, which further cemented the full independence of Germany as a finally united nation. Unfortunately, the conflict lived on with the East Germans. Quote, unification brought with it the freedom to travel the world and for some more material wealth, but it also brought social breakdown, widespread unemployment, blacklisting, a crass materialism, and an elbow society, as well as a demonization of the country. End quote, Bruni de la Motte. People that worked in places that included the government were unemployed, causing many to lose their jobs. In the countryside, 1.7 million hectares of agricultural land and forests were sold off, resulting in 80% of farmers to lose their jobs. Individuals started going through personal economic conflicts. This crisis shows that even in times of light, there are shadows. If the wall is to be recreated in the future, somewhere in the world, even its end, which represent a happy time, will only disguise the ugliness and cover the secrets it holds. These statistics show that the idea of barriers should not continue in the future, for even happiness holds darkness that is disregarded. Unfortunately, the conflicts that the German people endured is soon to be relived in the future. Ever since the United States' inauguration of President Donald J. Trump on January 20, 2017, a new controversial topic has taken the stage, for a wall is expected to be built to separate Mexico and the United States in the near future. With the idea and possibility of a wall looming over Americans, anticipation and question is bounded to it, but the Berlin Wall incidents proffers lessons that contribute to this topic. The purpose of this wall, like any other barricade, is to prevent travel between two sides, for this case specifically, undocumented travel between Mexico and the U.S. However, human nature is peculiar, and that can be seen time and time again, not only from the Berlin Wall, but other conflicts such as the Revolutionary War and the Gwangju Uprising. It is made evident from these historical events that humankind will forever desire freedom and the betterment of themselves and their loved ones. According to Berlin statistics, thousands of people attempt to escape despite the risks, traps, and guards. More than 5,000 people successfully made it across the wall, and roughly 138 or so died from it. Methods of escape range from digging tunnels and flying hot air balloons to ziplining and floating on air mattresses, all due to the unwavering love of liberty.
And then again, I think a lot of it has to do with the desire of these people who are hoping to escape communism, that they're doing everything they can to get through the wall.
It shows that if a person desires something so great and powerful, they'll continue marching on despite the conflicts and barriers, but what is beyond the fear and risk holds something so beautiful that turns the pain into bliss. So the question remains, will this upcoming wall prevail? History says...